The salvage yard stretched endlessly under the crimson sky of Kepler 442b, a graveyard of twisted metal and broken dreams. Marcus Chun wiped grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better decades, squinting at the latest batch of wreckage the recovery drones had dumped near his workshop. Another day, another pile of alien technology that most humans couldn't begin to understand, let alone repair. But Marcus wasn't most humans. The 43-year-old mechanic had spent the last 15 years on this remote frontier world, establishing himself as the go-to person for fixing anything that flew, crawled, or limped through space. His reputation had spread across 3-star systems, though he preferred the solitude of his workshop to the crowded space stations where his skills might earn him 10 times as much. The morning air carried the metallic tang of ozone and the distant hum of atmospheric processors. Marcus sipped his coffee, real earth coffee, one of his few luxuries, and surveyed the new arrivals. Most of it looked like standard Zephyrian transport debris, probably from another trade convoy that had pushed their engines too hard, trying to outrun pirates. Nothing unusual there. Then he saw it. Half buried beneath a twisted sheet of hull plating was something that made him pause mid-sip. It wasn't the technology that caught his attention, though the sleek, organic curves of the craft were unlike anything in his database. It was the sound coming from within, a low, rhythmic whimpering that spoke of pain and desperation in a language older than words. Marcus set down his cup and approached carefully. The craft was small, barely larger than a personal shuttle, but its design defied easy categorization. The hull seemed to flow like liquid metal frozen mid-motion, with no visible seams or joints. Bioluminescent panels flickered weakly along its surface, pulsing in time with that pitiful whimpering. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, running his hand along the warm surface. The metal, if it was metal, responded to his touch, rippling slightly like water. The sound came again, weaker this time. Whatever was inside was dying. Marcus had strict rules about his work. He fixed machines, not people. Too many complications that way. Too many questions from authorities who preferred their frontier mechanics to mind their own business. But as he circled the strange craft, searching for an entry point, those rules felt increasingly arbitrary. His scanner indicated life signs within, faint but present. The atmospheric readings were toxic to most known species, but his workshop's emergency medical bay could handle basic xenobiology if needed. The real question was whether whatever was inside wanted help or would tear his throat out for trying to provide it. Only one way to find out, Marcus said to himself, a habit he developed during long months of solitude. He spent the next hour studying the craft's surface, mapping its systems with every scanner he owned. The technology was incredible, beyond incredible, really. The ship wasn't just advanced. It was elegant in a way that suggested thousands of years of refinement. Yet something catastrophic had damaged it, leaving deep gouges in the hull and causing several of its bioluminescent panels to flicker erratically. Finally, he found what might be an access port, a circular depression about the size of his palm. When he pressed his hand against it, the craft responded immediately. The metal flowed aside like thick liquid, revealing an interior that took his breath away. The cabin was larger than the external dimensions should have allowed, its walls covered in softly glowing panels that pulsed with gentle blue light. At the center, in what could only be described as a biomechanical cocoon, lay the most extraordinary creature Marcus had ever seen. It was vaguely canine in shape, but stood nearly as tall as a human at the shoulder. Its fur was a deep midnight blue that seemed to absorb light, and its limbs were elongated and graceful in a way that spoke of alien evolution. But it was the intelligence in its golden eyes that stopped Marcus cold. Even through obvious pain and exhaustion, those eyes held a depth of awareness that was unmistakably sentient. The creature, Wolf, his mind supplied, though no Earth wolf had ever looked like this, was badly injured. Deep wounds marked its flanks, and one of its rear legs was twisted at an unnatural angle. Worse, the biomechanical supports that had been keeping it alive were failing, their lights dimming with each labored breath. "Easy there," Marcus whispered, though he had no idea if the creature could understand him. "I'm here to help." The wolf's eyes fixed on his, and, for a moment, Marcus felt an impossible sensation, as if something was gently probing the edges of his mind. Not invasive or threatening, but curious, cautious. The feeling faded after a few seconds, leaving him wondering if he'd imagined it. Moving carefully, Marcus began assessing the creature's injuries. His medical scanner painted a grim picture. The wolf was suffering from severe trauma, malnutrition, and exposure to some kind of exotic radiation. Without immediate treatment, it would be dead within hours. The biomechanical cocoon was clearly some kind of medical device, but its alien technology was failing. Marcus could see the underlying logic, support systems, monitoring equipment, even what appeared to be nanomedical devices, but the power source was exhausted, and several critical components had been damaged in whatever disaster had brought the craft to his world. "This is insane," he muttered, but his hands were already working, connecting his portable power unit to the alien medical system. The response was immediate. The blue lights brightened, and the creature's breathing became less labored. But it was only a temporary measure. The alien technology was incompatible with his power systems, and the improvised connection wouldn't last long. If he wanted to save this magnificent being, he'd need to do something unprecedented in his career: perform alien surgery with equipment designed for machines. Marcus spent the next several hours studying the creature's physiology through his scanners. Whatever species this was, they were clearly apex predators from a high-gravity world. The bone density was incredible, and the muscle structure suggested both power and grace far beyond anything Earth had produced. But beneath the alien exterior, the basic biological principles were familiar enough. Circulation, respiration, neural activity, all followed patterns he could understand and work with. The real challenge came when he tried to move the creature to his workshop's medical bay. Despite its injuries, the wolf was massive, easily 300 pounds of dense alien muscle and bone. And it was conscious, those golden eyes tracking his every movement with alert intelligence. "I'm going to need your cooperation here," Marcus said, knowing how absurd it was to talk to an alien predator as if it were a patient. "I can't carry you, and I can't help you if you're stuck in there." To his amazement, the creature responded. Not with words. Its anatomy clearly wasn't designed for human speech, but with a series of low, musical sounds that somehow conveyed understanding and agreement. When Marcus gestured toward the workshop, the wolf nodded once, a disturbingly human gesture from such an alien being. Getting the creature out of its failing cocoon and into the medical bay was a nightmare of improvised engineering and careful animal handling. Marcus had to modify a cargo lifter to serve as a stretcher, all while maintaining power to the creature's life support systems. By the time they reached the workshop, both human and alien were exhausted. But the real work was just beginning. Marcus had never performed surgery on anything larger than the occasional injured maintenance droid, but the wolf's injuries left him no choice. The medical bay's diagnostic systems were sophisticated enough to map the creature's internal structure, revealing the full extent of the damage. 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, severe lacerations across the torso, and that twisted rear leg that would require extensive reconstruction. "Okay," he said, more to steady his own nerves than to communicate with his patient. "Let's see what we can do." The surgery lasted 18 hours. Marcus worked with the precision of an engineer and the desperation of someone who'd found something precious in a world full of broken things. His medical systems weren't designed for alien physiology, but his engineering background served him well as he improvised solutions to problems no human had ever faced. The broken ribs required metal plates, titanium alloy that Marcus carefully shaped to match the alien bone structure. The punctured lung was sealed with biocompatible foam, a technique he'd learned from field medics during his military service decades ago. But it was the leg that proved most challenging. The wolf's limb wasn't just broken. It had been crushed, possibly by whatever had destroyed its ship. Traditional surgical techniques weren't sufficient. the damage was too extensive. Marcus found himself drawing on his mechanical expertise, creating a hybrid biomechanical repair that would have been impossible without his unique combination of skills. He worked through the night, pausing only to check the creature's vital signs and adjust the anesthesia. The wolf's physiology was remarkably resilient. Its healing rate was several times faster than human normal, but the injuries were severe enough that even alien resilience had its limits. Dawn was breaking over the salvage yard when Marcus finally stepped back from the operating table, his hands shaking from exhaustion. The wolf lay still, its breathing steady and strong for the first time since he'd found it. The biomonitors showed stable vital signs, and the emergency repairs he'd made to its ship's medical cocoon were holding. But the creature was still unconscious, and Marcus had no idea how it would react to waking up in an alien environment, surrounded by the scent of the being who had cut into its flesh with sharp instruments. For all his success in saving its life, he might have simply postponed the moment when it killed him. As if reading his thoughts, the wolf's eyes slowly opened. Those golden orbs fixed on Marcus immediately, and once again he felt that strange sensation of something gently touching the edges of his mind. But this time, instead of curiosity, he sensed something else entirely. Gratitude. The emotion was so clear, so human in its intensity, that Marcus almost staggered. The wolf couldn't speak his language, but it didn't need to. The intelligence behind those eyes was vast and ancient, and it understood exactly what had been done for it. Marcus pulled up a chair beside the medical table, suddenly feeling the weight of the last day and night. "Well," he said softly, "I guess we're stuck with each other for a while. That leg's going to need weeks to heal properly, and I have no idea what you eat or how to contact your people." The wolf made a sound, a low, complex vocalization that seemed to carry layers of meaning. Marcus got the impression it was trying to communicate something important, but the specifics were beyond his understanding. "Look," he said, settling back in his chair, "I know this is all strange and scary. God knows it's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me, and I've seen some pretty weird stuff out here. But you're safe now. Whatever happened to you, wherever you came from, you're safe here." The wolf studied him for a long moment, those golden eyes seeming to weigh his words and find truth in them. Then, in a gesture that would have been remarkable from any creature, but seemed miraculous from this alien being, it slowly extended one massive paw toward him. Marcus reached out carefully, letting his hand make contact with the soft fur. The paw was warm and surprisingly gentle, considering the claws he could see retracted within it. For several minutes, they stayed like that, human and alien, connected by simple physical contact that transcended language barriers and species differences. "I don't know what you are," Marcus said quietly, "or where you came from, but I'll tell you this, nobody's going to hurt you while you're here. That's a promise." The wolf's eyes closed slowly, a gesture Marcus somehow knew was acknowledgement and acceptance. When they opened again, there was something new in their depths, not just gratitude, but trust. And in that moment, Marcus Chun realized his quiet life of fixing broken machines had just become infinitely more complicated. He was no longer just a mechanic working alone on a frontier world. He was the guardian of something precious and mysterious, something that would change everything he thought he knew about the universe and humanity's place in it. Outside his workshop, the crimson sun climbed higher into an alien sky, and in the distance, the salvage yard's automated systems continued their endless task of sorting through the debris of interstellar civilization. But inside, in the warm glow of medical monitors and the soft sound of healing breath, something unprecedented was beginning. The last of an ancient species and a solitary human mechanic were about to embark on a journey that would test everything they thought they knew about friendship, loyalty, and the true meaning of family in a universe full of wonders and terrors beyond imagination. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus found the wolf, and his entire world had transformed in ways he could never have imagined. The creature, who he'd started calling Shadow, due to its midnight blue fur, had recovered with startling speed. The hybrid biomechanical repairs to its leg were healing beautifully, and the other injuries had mended themselves with an efficiency that defied human understanding of biology. But it wasn't just the physical healing that amazed Marcus. It was the intelligence. Shadow was learning human technology at an impossible rate. Within days of regaining consciousness, the wolf had figured out how to operate the workshop's basic systems. Lights, doors, even the coffee maker, though it showed no interest in the beverage itself. More remarkably, it seemed to understand the underlying principles behind the machines, not just their operation. Marcus discovered this when he found Shadow studying the damaged components from its own ship, making soft vocalizations that somehow conveyed complex technical concepts. When the wolf looked at him and then at a specific tool, Marcus found himself understanding exactly what was needed. It was as if Shadow could project its intentions directly into his mind, not through telepathy exactly, but through some form of enhanced empathy that transcended species barriers. "You're not just intelligent," Marcus said one morning as he watched Shadow delicately manipulate a micro-circuitry repair with tools designed for human hands. "You're an engineer." The wolf's golden eyes met his, and Marcus felt that familiar touch at the edge of his consciousness, an acknowledgement, but also something more. Sadness, perhaps. Loss. Over the weeks, Marcus had pieced together fragments of Shadow's story through their strange form of communication. The wolf was indeed the last of its kind, though the specifics remained unclear. There had been others, many others, but something catastrophic had happened. War, perhaps, or some cosmic disaster that had scattered Shadow's people across the void. The ship itself told part of the story. As they worked together to understand its technology, Marcus realized it wasn't just a vessel. It was a lifeboat, designed to preserve both the physical being and the cultural knowledge of an entire species. The bioluminescent panels weren't just decorative. They were data storage devices containing millions of years of accumulated wisdom. "No wonder you're so sad," Marcus murmured as the scope of Shadow's loss became clear. "You're carrying the weight of an entire civilization." Shadow made a sound, a low, haunting vocalization that needed no translation. It was the sound of profound loneliness, of being the final witness to wonders that would die with its passing. But there was something else in that sound, something that Marcus was beginning to understand. Hope. Their breakthrough came during the 4th week. Marcus had been struggling with a particularly complex repair on a Zephyrian transport engine when Shadow approached, its massive form moving with characteristic grace despite the still healing leg. The wolf studied the problem for a moment, then began a series of vocalizations unlike any Marcus had heard before. Suddenly, the solution was crystal clear in his mind. Not just the immediate fix, but a complete understanding of how the alien engine's quantum tunneling drive actually worked. The knowledge didn't feel foreign or imposed. It felt like remembering something he'd always known but had temporarily forgotten. "How did you do that?" Marcus asked, staring at Shadow in amazement. The wolf's response came not in sound, but in that gentle touch at the edge of his consciousness. Marcus felt himself understanding concepts that had no human words, something about quantum entanglement on a biological level, about minds that could share knowledge as easily as humans shared breath. "Your people," Marcus said slowly, "you're not just telepathic. You're something more. You share consciousness itself." Shadow's acknowledgement was warm with approval. Marcus was beginning to understand. The revelation changed everything about their relationship. Marcus realized that Shadow wasn't just learning human technology, it was integrating that knowledge with its own species' understanding of the universe, creating hybrid solutions that surpassed both individual contributions. The repairs they made together were more elegant, more efficient, more harmonious than anything either could have achieved alone. But the true test of their partnership came when the salvage yard's proximity alarms began screaming. Marcus rushed to his monitoring station, Shadow close behind. The screen showed 3 ships dropping out of hyperspace, sleek, predatory vessels with the distinctive energy signatures of Corvani raiders. Pirates and, not the desperate scavenger kind. These were professionals, the type who left no witnesses. Damn, Marcus breathed. The Corvani were notorious for their brutality, especially toward isolated frontier settlements. They'd strip his salvage yard of anything valuable, then kill him to eliminate evidence of their presence. Shadow moved to his side, golden eyes studying the tactical display with obvious understanding. The wolf made a series of complex vocalizations, and suddenly Marcus's mind was flooded with strategic concepts, evasion patterns, defensive possibilities, and a dozen other tactical considerations that his human brain would have taken minutes to calculate. But the conclusion was inescapable. His workshop's defenses were minimal, designed to discourage casual thieves, not military-grade raiders. They were trapped. Then, Shadow did something unexpected. It moved to the damage control console from its ship, the one component Marcus hadn't been able to fully repair. The wolf's paws moved across the bioluminescent panels with practiced precision, and the entire device came alive with brilliant blue light. The workshop's systems suddenly exploded with new capabilities. Sensors extended their range tenfold, revealing detailed schematics of the approaching raider ships. Defense screens materialized around the building, their exotic energy signatures unlike anything in Marcus's database. Most remarkably, the workshop itself seemed to disappear from conventional sensors, stealth technology that made human efforts look like children's toys. Incredible, Marcus whispered, watching the raiders' ships hesitate as their target vanished from their screens. But Shadow wasn't finished. The wolf continued working with its ship's systems, and Marcus felt knowledge flowing into his mind, understanding of weapons and defenses that existed at the intersection of biology and technology. The raiders weren't just facing a hidden target. They were facing something their scanners couldn't even classify. The lead raider ship began broadcasting on standard frequencies, threats, demands, promises of quick death if Marcus surrendered valuable salvage. The messages were typical Corvani bluster, designed to terrorize victims into compliance. Marcus looked at Shadow, seeing something new in those golden eyes. Not just intelligence or sadness, but a cold predatory calculation that reminded him exactly what kind of creature he was dealing with. "They picked the wrong target today," Marcus said softly. Shadow's response was a sound Marcus had never heard before, a vocalization that seemed to harmonize with the ship's energy patterns, creating resonances that vibrated through his bones. It was beautiful and terrifying, like listening to a star sing its own destruction. The effect on the raider ships was immediate and devastating. Their engines began fluctuating wildly as the harmonic frequencies disrupted their quantum field generators. Weapons systems failed as targeting computers couldn't lock onto the source of the interference. Within minutes, all three vessels were dead in space, their crews trapped in metal coffins that no longer responded to their commands. "My God," Marcus breathed. "You disabled them without firing a shot." Shadow's golden eyes met his, and Marcus felt a flood of complex emotions, satisfaction at protecting their home, but also profound sadness. The wolf had used its people's technology in a way it was never meant to be used. Songs of creation twisted into weapons of destruction. But there was no regret, Marcus realized. Shadow would do whatever was necessary to protect what mattered. The Corvani weren't finished, though. Unable to use their ships, the raiders deployed personal assault pods, small, fast craft designed to deliver boarding parties. They were coming from Marcus's workshop, and they'd be carrying heavy weapons. 20 minutes until they reach us, Marcus said, studying his displays. Even with your ship's defenses, they'll eventually break through. Shadow moved to another section of its ship's control console, and Marcus felt new knowledge flowing into his mind, combat tactic from species that had fought wars across galaxies. But it wasn't just military strategy, it was something deeper, more primal. The hunting instincts of an apex predator combined with the technological mastery of an ancient civilization. "You want to meet them head on," Marcus said, understanding Shadow's intention. "You want to hunt." The wolf's acknowledgement was fierce with anticipation. For weeks, it had been healing, learning, adapting to its new circumstances. But beneath the gentle intelligence and profound sadness, Shadow was still what it had always been, a predator without equal. Marcus felt his own blood stirring in response. He'd spent 15 years on this frontier world, fixing broken things and avoiding trouble. But before that, he'd been something else entirely. A soldier, a warrior, someone who understood that sometimes violence was the only answer to violence. "All right," he said, moving to his personal weapons locker. "Let's show these bastards what happens when they threaten our home." The next 20 minutes were spent in frantic preparation. Marcus donned the battle armor he hadn't worn in over a decade, its systems coming online with familiar efficiency. Shadow's ship provided equipment upgrades that transformed his conventional weapons into something far more lethal. Energy weapons that could penetrate Corvani armor, targeting systems that could track multiple opponents simultaneously, and, most importantly, a communications link that would let him coordinate with his alien partner. As the assault pods touched down outside his workshop, Marcus and Shadow took their positions. The human crouched behind reinforced barricades, his enhanced weapons ready. The wolf stood in the center of the main floor, its massive form radiating predatory readiness. "Remember," Marcus said over their shared comm link, "we want at least one alive for questioning." Shadow's response was a sound that might have been laughter if wolves from distant galaxies could laugh. It was a distinctly unsettling sound. The Corvani came through the doors with professional efficiency, their powered armor and energy weapons making them formidable opponents. They expected to find a terrified mechanic cowering behind his machines. Instead, they found something that challenged every assumption they'd made about this raid. The first raider through the door died instantly as Shadow's jaws closed around his helmet with impossible precision. The alien metal crumpled like paper, and the warrior inside never had time to scream. The second and third raiders managed to bring their weapons up, but Marcus's enhanced targeting system had already locked onto their positions. Energy bolts designed to penetrate starship hulls made short work of personal armor, dropping both Corvani before they could fire a shot. But it was what happened next that truly demonstrated the perfect coordination Marcus and Shadow had developed. The remaining raiders tried to establish a defensive perimeter, using their numerical advantage to overwhelm their opponents through concentrated firepower. It was a sound tactical decision that might have worked against conventional defenders. They weren't facing conventional defenders. Shadow moved like liquid death between the energy beams, its enhanced reflexes turning the raiders' coordinated assault into chaos. At the same time, Marcus's enhanced weapons systems allowed him to provide covering fire with impossible precision, each shot calculated to support his partner's movements without risking friendly fire. The battle lasted less than 3 minutes. When the smoke cleared, 6 Corvani raiders lay dead, their advanced armor and weapons useless against opponents who fought with perfect coordination and superior technology. Only one survived, wounded and trapped beneath a piece of debris that Shadow had strategically collapsed. Marcus approached the surviving raider cautiously, his weapon trained on the alien's head. The Corvani was roughly humanoid, but larger and more heavily muscled, with the kind of scars that spoke of a lifetime of violence. Its dark eyes held no fear, only calculation and barely contained rage. "Who sent you?" Marcus asked in trade standard. The raider's response was a string of curses in several languages, followed by threats that would have made a veteran spacer blush. Marcus listened patiently, then asked the question again. "No one of import, human," the Corvani finally said, its voice distorted by its damaged helmet systems. "Your salvage yard was simply a target of opportunity. We follow the scrap haulers, pick off isolated settlements." "That's not the whole truth," Marcus said, feeling Shadow's presence at the edge of his mind. The wolf was reading micro-expressions and physiological responses that human senses couldn't detect. "There's something specific you were looking for." The raider's eyes shifted slightly, a tell so subtle that only Shadow's enhanced perception could have caught it. Through their mental link, Marcus felt the wolf's certainty that their prisoner was lying. "You're looking for something alien," Marcus pressed. Something that doesn't belong in normal salvage operations. This time, the raider's reaction was unmistakable. Fear flickered across its features before being quickly suppressed. "I know nothing of such things," the Corvani said, but its voice carried the weight of deception. Shadow moved closer to the trapped raider, golden eyes fixed on the alien's face. The wolf made a sound, soft, almost musical, but the effect on the Corvani was electric. The warrior's eyes went wide with recognition and terror. "Valkyris," it whispered, using a word that Marcus didn't recognize, but somehow understood through his link with Shadow. "Destroyer. Death Singer. Ancient enemy." "You know what Shadow is," Marcus said, pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place. The raider's composure cracked entirely. "The Valkyries are extinct. They have been dead for 1,000 cycles." The hegemony made certain. The words cut off as the Corvani realized what it had revealed. Marcus felt Shadow's reaction through their mental link. Not surprise, but grim confirmation of suspicions the wolf had harbored but not shared. "The hegemony," Marcus repeated. "Who are they?" But the raider had recovered enough composure to refuse further cooperation. No amount of questioning could extract additional information, and Marcus found himself facing a difficult decision. In a normal course of things, he turned the prisoner over to frontier authorities and let them handle the interrogation. But this was no longer a normal situation. Through his link with Shadow, Marcus felt the wolf's recommendation, not cruel, but pragmatic. The Corvani had come to kill them, and would certainly return with greater force if allowed to report back. There was no prison on this frontier world capable of holding a determined raider, and no authority Marcus trusted with the secret of Shadow's existence. In the end, the decision was taken out of his hands. The raider's armor contained a suicide device that activated when it became clear that rescue was impossible. The explosion was small, but effective, leaving nothing behind but scrap metal and smoke. "Well," Marcus said as he surveyed the destruction in his workshop, "I guess we know why you've been hiding." Shadow's response carried layers of meaning that would have taken hours to express in words. The wolf species, the Valkyries, hadn't simply gone extinct through natural disaster or internal conflict. They had been systematically hunted and destroyed by something called the hegemony, an organization powerful enough to conduct genocide on a galactic scale. And now that Shadow had revealed itself, that ancient enemy would inevitably come calling. Marcus looked around his workshop, his home, for 15 years, filled with the accumulated treasures and tools of a lifetime spent fixing broken things. Soon, you would have to abandon it all, because staying meant death for both of them. But as he watched Shadow move through the debris with careful precision, already planning their next moves with the strategic mind of a species that had survived the unthinkable, Marcus realized he wasn't afraid. For the first time in decades, he felt truly alive. They were no longer just a mechanic and an injured alien. They were partners, allies, friends bonded by shared danger and mutual respect. And if the hegemony wanted Shadow, they'd have to go through a very determined human to get it. The war was coming whether they wanted it or not. But this time, the last Valkyries wouldn't face extinction alone. The evacuation from Marcus's workshop took 3 days of careful planning and backbreaking labor. Everything had to be sorted. What was essential, what could be replaced, and what would have to be abandoned to the approaching storm. Shadow proved invaluable during the process. Its enhanced senses detecting surveillance devices the Corvani had planted, and its strategic mind helping prioritize what equipment will be most useful in their uncertain future. But it wasn't just physical preparation that consumed those crucial days. Marcus was learning things about the galaxy that shattered every assumption he'd held about humanity's place in the cosmos. Through their deepening mental connection, Shadow shared fragments of the true history, a tale of cycles of expansion and extinction that stretched back millions of years. The hegemony wasn't just another alien empire. It was a force of entropy that had consumed dozens of advanced civilizations, always following the same pattern. First contact, trade relationships, cultural exchange, and finally, systematic destruction of any species that possess technology or abilities that might threaten hegemony supremacy. How many times has this happened? Marcus asked as they loaded the last of their essential equipment onto the modified transport he'd cobbled together from salvage yard components. Shadow's response came not in words, but in emotions and images. Worlds burning, stars going dark, entire species reduced to scattered refugees hiding in the void between galaxies. The Valkyries had been just the most recent victims, their extinction particularly brutal because their biological integration with technology represented an evolutionary path the hegemony found intolerable. And humanity? Marcus felt sick even asking the question. The answer was what he'd feared. Humanity was already on the hegemony's list, flagged as a species showing dangerous potential. The rapid expansion of human colonies, their adaptability, their tendency to form unexpected alliances with other species, all of it marked them as a future threat to be eliminated. How long do we have? Shadow's estimate was sobering. Perhaps 50 Earth years before the hegemony moved against humanity directly, but the groundwork was already being laid. Trade disputes that would escalate into conflicts. Terrorist attacks that would be blamed on human extremists. Environmental disasters on frontier worlds that would appear accidental but weren't. The pattern was always the same. Weaken the target species through seemingly unrelated crises, then move in as peacekeepers when society began to collapse under the strain. Unless someone stops them first, Marcus said, understanding the full scope of what Shadow was proposing. The wolf's acknowledgement carried grim determination. Its people's dying gift, the vast technological and cultural database stored in its ship, wasn't just a memorial to what had been lost. It was a weapon containing everything needed to fight back against the hegemony's genocidal campaign. But it would require allies. Shadow alone, even with all its people's knowledge, couldn't challenge an empire that spanned galaxies. It needed partners who could adapt Valkyrie's technology to their own capabilities, who could carry the fight to multiple fronts simultaneously. It needed humans. Their first destination was Kepler Station, a massive orbital facility that served as the hub for 36 frontier worlds. Marcus had contacts there, smugglers, mercenaries, and black market dealers who operated outside official channels. If anyone could help them disappear while they planned their next moves, it would be the criminals and outcasts who made the station their home. The journey to Kepler Station took 18 hours, giving Marcus time to absorb the modifications Shadow's ship had made to his transport. The vessel's performance had improved dramatically. Faster acceleration, better fuel efficiency, and stealth capabilities that would make them invisible to most scanners. More importantly, the ship's computers now carried a complete database of hegemony tactics and technology, information that would prove invaluable in the coming conflict. But the most significant change was in Marcus himself. The mental connection he shared with Shadow was evolving, becoming stronger and more sophisticated with each passing day. He found himself thinking in patterns that weren't entirely human, processing information at speeds that should have been impossible for baseline Homo sapiens. "You're changing me," he said as they approached Kepler Station's traffic control perimeter. Shadow's response was complex, layered with apology and necessity. The wolf hadn't intended for the connection to develop so quickly or so thoroughly, but the urgency of their situation was forcing an acceleration of normal bonding processes. Marcus was becoming something new, not quite human, not quite Valkyries, but something that combined the best aspects of both species. Will I still be me? The answer came wrapped in certainty and warmth. The connection enhanced what was already there. It didn't replace or override. Marcus would remain fundamentally himself, just with expanded capabilities and a deeper understanding of the universe around him. As they docked at Kepler Station, Marcus felt the full weight of what they were attempting. The facility was home to nearly 1 million beings from dozens of species, all of them going about their daily lives without any awareness of the threat hanging over them. In a few decades, if Shadow's warnings proved accurate, places like this would be battlefields in a war for survival. unless they could stop it first. Marcus's first contact on the station was Zara Okafor, a human smuggler who'd been running illegal cargo for the better part of 20 years. She operated out of a bar in the station's lower levels, a place where questions weren't asked and memories were refreshingly short when authorities came calling. "Marcus Chun," Zara said when she spotted him entering her establishment. "I heard your place got hit by raiders. Sorry for your loss." Marcus nodded, accepting the condolences while studying the bar's patrons. Shadow had remained on the ship, their mental connection allowing them to communicate across the station's breadth, but its enhanced senses were monitoring the area through Marcus's perception. "Actually, that's why I'm here," Marcus said, taking a seat at Zara's private table. "I need passage to somewhere the Corvani won't think to look." Running scared, Zara's tone was neutral, but Marcus caught the slight disappointment. His reputation had been built on standing his ground and fixing problems, not fleeing when things got difficult. "Running smart," Marcus corrected. "There's more to this than simple piracy, Zara. The Corvani were looking for something specific, something they were willing to kill for. That makes it bigger than I can handle alone." Through his connection with Shadow, Marcus felt the wolf's approval. They discussed this approach, reveal enough of the truth to gain allies without exposing the full scope of the threat. "What kind of specific?" Zara asked, leaning forward with interest. "Alien technology. Something old and dangerous that fell into my salvage yard by accident." Marcus let his voice carry the weight of someone who'd seen things he couldn't unsee. The kind of thing that brings down government wrath if you're caught with it. It wasn't entirely false. Shadow's technology was certainly alien, old, and dangerous in the right context. And the hegemony was definitely a form of government, even if their jurisdiction extended far beyond what Zara could imagine. How dangerous? Zara's eyes had taken on the calculating look of someone weighing risk against profit. "The kind where knowledge is more valuable than the hardware," Marcus said carefully. "Information that certain parties would pay very well to acquire and kill to keep secret." Through their link, he felt Shadow's subtle guidance, helping him craft an explanation that would appeal to Zara's mercenary instincts without revealing their true purpose. Information about what? New forms of quantum field manipulation, biological integration with mechanical systems, things that would revolutionize space travel if they could be reverse engineered. All of it was true, just not complete. Shadow's people had indeed mastered technologies that would transform galactic civilization, but they'd also learned the terrible cost of drawing the hegemony's attention. Zara was quiet for several minutes, working through the implications. Finally, she leaned back in her chair with the expression of someone who'd made a difficult decision. "There's a place," she said slowly, "deep in the Terminus Nebula, where the NAV computers can't plot reliable courses. Used to be a research station, abandoned when the funding dried up. Now it's home to people who have reasons to stay off the grid." Marcus felt Shadow's interest spike. The Terminus Nebula was notorious among spacers, a region where sensor efficiency dropped to nearly zero, and hyperspace jumps became exercises in controlled chaos. It would be the perfect place to establish a base of operations. "What's the catch?" Marcus asked. "Getting there alive, mostly. The nebula's full of gravitational anomalies and exotic radiation. Most pilots won't even attempt the run. But you will." Zara's smile was sharp with professional pride. "For the right price, I'll fly through the gates of hell itself." The negotiation took another hour, with Zara's price climbing steadily as Marcus explained the urgency of their situation. By the time they reached an agreement, he'd committed to paying her enough to buy a small starship. But as they were finalizing the deal, Shadow's warning came through their mental link, urgent and alarmed. The Wolf had detected energy signatures approaching the station, ships with the distinctive quantum field configurations of hegemony vessels. "We need to leave," Marcus said, interrupting Zara's explanation of departure protocols. "Now, what's wrong?" "Those specific parties I mentioned? They just arrived." Zara didn't question further. 20 years of illegal operations had taught her to trust sudden urges to flee. Within minutes, They were heading for her ship, a modified courier vessel that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts, but flew with surprising grace. Shadow was waiting at Marcus's transport, the wolf's massive form tense with readiness for combat. Through their link, Marcus felt his partner's analysis of the approaching threat. 5 ships, heavily armed, with scanning capabilities that would eventually penetrate even their enhanced stealth systems. Change of plans, Marcus said as they reached the docking bay. We're not just leaving. We're taking my ship too. 2 ships. Zara looked confused. That doubles our profile and halves our maneuverability. Trust me, Marcus said, helping Shadow board the courier while uploading control codes to Zara's computer. My ship has modifications that will help us survive what's coming. As if to emphasize his point, the station's proximity alarms began sounding. The approaching ships had been identified as unknown vessels refusing to respond to traffic control. Standard procedure called for defensive measures and immediate notification of system authorities. But Marcus knew there would be no authorities coming. The hegemony ships would identify themselves as peacekeeping forces investigating reports of terrorist activity. They'd be granted full cooperation in searching the station for dangerous fugitives who'd already escaped into the nebula. Zara's ship launched from Kepler Station with all the urgency of a vessel fleeing customs inspection. Behind them, Marcus's transport followed in close formation, its enhanced systems providing sensor coverage that extended far beyond normal parameters. To external observers, they looked like a smuggler and client making a run for open space. The reality was far more complex. Through his connection with Shadow, Marcus was coordinating a fighting retreat that drew on millions of years of Valkyr's tactical experience. The wolf's knowledge of hegemony pursuit patterns allowed them to anticipate enemy movements, staying just ahead of detection while leading their pursuers away from innocent civilians. They're not following standard intercept protocols, Zara said, studying her sensor displays with growing alarm. These ships are hunting us specifically. Keep heading for the nebula, Marcus said. Don't deviate from course, no matter what. The first energy beams lanced past their ships as they crossed the system's edge, near misses that demonstrated the pursuing vessel's superior speed and firepower. But Shadow's enhanced sensors had detected something their enemies couldn't see: gravitational anomalies at the nebula's edge that would affect pursuit calculations. Now, Marcus said, linking his ship's navigation computer to Zara's systems. Both vessels executed a synchronized course change that should have been impossible without extensive practice. They dove toward the nebula's edge at an angle that utilized the gravitational distortions to slingshot them deeper into the chaotic region. Behind them, the hegemony ships attempted to follow, but their pursuit pattern had been calculated for conventional prey. The sudden course change caught them by surprise, and the gravitational anomalies that helped the fleeing vessels nearly tore apart their pursuers. 2 of the 5 enemy ships were forced to break off pursuit with damaged drive systems. The remaining 3 continued the chase, but their formation was broken, their coordination disrupted. What the hell just happened? Zara demanded as they plunged into the nebula's concealing embrace. We used their own assumptions against them, Marcus said, watching the pursuing ships struggle with navigation problems their computers couldn't solve. They hunt species like us all the time, but they've never faced anyone who understood their tactics. Through the nebula's swirling gases and energy fields, Marcus could feel Shadow's satisfaction. The first engagement of their war against the hegemony had been a victory, small but significant. They'd proven that the enemy wasn't invincible, that their patterns could be learned and exploited. But it was only the beginning. As they navigated deeper into the Terminus Nebula, heading for a rendezvous with people who lived outside galactic civilization, Marcus understood that everything in his life had changed forever. He was no longer Marcus Chun, salvage yard operator. He was a soldier in a war most people didn't even know existed, allied with the last survivor of a species that had paid the ultimate price for the knowledge they now carried. The hegemony had spent millennia perfecting their genocidal campaigns against isolated species. They'd never faced a coordinated resistance that combined multiple civilizations' technologies and tactical knowledge. They were about to learn why that had been a mistake. In the depths of the Terminus Nebula, surrounded by pirates, smugglers, and outcasts who'd found refuge in one of the galaxy's most dangerous regions, Marcus and Shadow began planning humanity's survival. The war for the future of galactic civilization was about to begin, and it would be fought by the most unlikely alliance in cosmic history, a human mechanic and an alien wolf who discovered that friendship could transcend any boundary, even the vast emptiness between stars. The abandoned research station designated Phoenix. 7 emerged from the Terminus Nebula's swirling chaos like a mechanical ghost. What had once been a cutting-edge xenobiology facility now served as home to nearly 10,000 souls who'd chosen exile over subjugation, freedom over safety. As Zara's ship and Marcus's transport approached the massive structure, Shadow's enhanced senses revealed the true scope of what they'd found. This wasn't just a refugee settlement. It was a fortress. The station's original research modules had been expanded with military-grade defensive systems, some of which Marcus recognized from his database of galactic technologies. Others were completely unknown, suggesting that the residents had been busy developing their own innovations. Gun emplacements tracked their approach with precision that spoke of military expertise, while sensor arrays swept them with scanning beams that probed deeper than standard commercial systems. State your business, came the challenge over standard frequencies. The voice was human, but the underlying accent carried the careful precision of someone who'd learned standard as a second language. Zara Okafor, Independent Transport, Zara responded, requesting asylum for passengers fleeing hegemony persecution. The response came immediately, without the usual delays that characterize frontier communication. Hegemony? Clarify threat level and estimated pursuit timeline. Through his connection with Shadow, Marcus felt the wolf's interest spike. These people knew about the hegemony, not as a theoretical threat, but as something concrete and immediate. Active pursuit broken at Nebula perimeter. Marcus interjected, switching to the emergency frequency Zara indicated. 5 ships, military configuration, seeking specific fugitives with classified xenotechnology. Xenotech. The voice's tone shifted to one of intense interest. What classification? Marcus looked at Shadow, seeking guidance. Through their mental link, the wolf conveyed complex concepts. The importance of honesty balanced against the need for security. The value of finding true allies versus the danger of premature revelation. Biological integration systems, Marcus said finally. Ancient origin, unprecedented capabilities. Information only, no active hardware. The communication channel went silent for several minutes. Marcus could imagine the frantic discussions taking place on the station, people weighing the value of new refugees against the risk of drawing unwanted attention. When the voice returned, it carried a tone of resignation mixed with determination. Docking Bay 7. Full quarantine protocols in effect. Any aggressive action will result in immediate venting to space. As they approached the designated bay, Marcus got his first clear look at Phoenix 7's modifications. The station had been turned into a masterpiece of defensive engineering, with overlapping fields of fire and redundant systems that could function even if major sections were destroyed. But more importantly, the technology was hybrid, combining elements from dozens of different species into something entirely new. Someone's been very busy, Zara observed as they passed through the outer defensive perimeter. Someone with access to technology from across the galaxy. Marcus agreed, feeling Shadow's growing excitement through their link. The docking bay itself was a marvel of improvised engineering. Magnetic clamps guided their ships into precise positions, while atmospheric barriers sealed them in isolated sections. Defense turrets tracked every movement with automated precision, but Marcus noticed something interesting. The targeting systems were designed to disable rather than destroy, suggesting people who valued life even when threatened. Their reception committee was equally impressive. 5 beings representing 4 different species, all wearing the kind of practical body armor that spoke of recent combat experience. The human who stepped forward was tall and lean, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command. "I'm Commander Sarah Elena," she said, extending her hand in greeting. "Welcome to Phoenix Station. I understand you're fleeing hegemony pursuit." Marcus shook her hand, noting the calluses that spoke of someone who worked with her hands as well as her mind. Marcus Chun. And yes, they were very interested in the technology my passenger carries. Elena's eyes shifted to Shadow, who had emerged from the transport with characteristic grace. The wolf's massive form drew startled exclamations from several of the reception committee, but Elena herself seemed more intrigued than alarmed. "Valkyris," she said softly, using the name that the Corvani raider had spoken with such fear. Shadow's response was immediate. A complex vocalization that carried layers of meaning Marcus was beginning to understand. Greeting, acknowledgement, and subtle testing to determine Elena's knowledge and intentions. "You know what I am," Shadow said, using the translation device Marcus had jury-rigged from components in his workshop. The artificial voice was flat and mechanical, but it allowed the wolf to communicate with beings who lacked their enhanced mental connection. "We know of your people," Elena said carefully. "The few who've reached us told stories of the hegemony's campaigns. We've been waiting for survivors." Marcus felt Shadow's surprise and cautious hope. The possibility that other Valkyries had survived and reached this place was something the wolf had barely dared to consider. Others. Shadow's mechanical voice carried an emotion the translator couldn't convey, but Marcus felt it through their link. Desperate longing mixed with fear of disappointment. "3," Elena said gently. "They arrived over the past 2 years, separately and in terrible condition. They're alive, but..." She paused, clearly struggling with how to explain something difficult. Through their mental connection, Marcus felt Shadow's understanding. The other survivors were broken in ways that went beyond physical damage. The systematic destruction of their species had shattered something essential in their psyche, leaving them functional but profoundly isolated. "I would like to see them," Shadow said. "Of course. But first, we need to understand what you brought to us. The hegemony doesn't pursue individuals this aggressively unless they possess something of extraordinary value." Over the next several hours, Marcus and Shadow found themselves in a briefing room that could have belonged to any military installation in human space. The difference was in the details. Technology from a dozen species integrated into a seamless whole, tactical displays that could process information in patterns suited to various forms of alien cognition. And the people. Phoenix Station wasn't just a human refuge. It was a coalition of species that had somehow learned to work together despite fundamental differences in biology and psychology. As Marcus listened to Elena explain their situation, he began to understand what they'd stumbled into. "We call ourselves the Free Worlds Coalition," Elena said, her words accompanied by holographic displays that showed the true scope of their organization. 43 systems, 12 species, roughly 800 million people who've chosen resistance over surrender. The map was staggering in its implications. What Marcus had assumed was a single refuger station was actually the nerve center of a multi-species alliance that spanned thousands of light years. Hidden bases, secret communication networks, and carefully concealed populations that had been preparing for war while the galaxy went about its normal business. "How long have you known?" Marcus asked. "About the hegemony? We've been tracking their activities for over 30 years, Elena said. The pattern was too consistent to be coincidence. Species after species suffering natural disasters and internal conflicts that left them vulnerable to outside intervention. Through their link, Marcus felt Shadow's mixture of admiration and regret. The wolf's people had fought alone, never knowing that others were watching and learning from their struggle. What we've lacked, Elena continued, is detailed intelligence on hegemony technology and tactics. We know their general patterns, but not their specific capabilities. Until now, she gestured toward Shadow, who had been listening to the briefing with intense concentration. Your people's archives could provide exactly what we need to mount an effective resistance. Shadow's response came through both the mechanical translator and the empathic connection to Marcus. Agreement, but with important conditions. The Valkyris knowledge was vast and dangerous, technologies that could reshape civilizations or destroy them entirely. Sharing such information required absolute trust. "Show me your other survivors," Shadow said. "Let me speak with my people. Then, we will decide what can be safely shared." Elena nodded, understanding the weight of what was being offered. This way, the medical section of Phoenix Station was another marvel of hybrid engineering, with treatment capabilities adapted to dozens of different physiologies. But it was the 3 beds in the high-security ward that captured Marcus's attention. The Valkyris lying there were magnificent even in their broken state. 2 were similar in size to Shadow, while the third was smaller and more lightly built. All showed signs of terrible trauma. Not just physical injuries, but the deeper damage that came from witnessing the extinction of everything they'd known and loved. Shadow approached the nearest bed slowly, making soft vocalizations that Marcus's enhanced hearing picked up as some form of traditional greeting. The response was immediate and heartbreaking, a cry of recognition and desperate relief that needed no translation. What followed was a conversation in harmonics and frequencies that human ears could barely detect. Marcus felt echoes of it through his connection with Shadow, emotional resonances that spoke of shared grief and the profound comfort of no longer being alone. But there was something else in that exchange, something that made Shadow's mental presence suddenly flare with excitement and determination. "They know," Shadow said, turning to Elena and Marcus. "The other 2, they know where the archives are hidden." Elena froned. "Archive." Through their translator, Shadow explained the concept that Marcus had only partially understood. The Valkyris archives weren't just a database. They were a living repository of technological and cultural knowledge from dozens of species the hegemony had destroyed. Hidden away at the moment of each civilization's fall, preserved against the day when someone might use them to fight back. "The coordinates," Shadow continued. "My people's final message, broadcast in the last moments before our homeworld died. The location of the central archive, where all the accumulated knowledge waits." Marcus felt his blood chill as he understood the implications. If the hegemony learned about the archive's location, they'd stop at nothing to destroy them. The secrets contained there represented the accumulated wisdom of their victims, technologies, and strategies that could bring down the greatest empire in galactic history. "How many others know?" Elena asked. "Only survivors," Shadow said. "And now only us." The weight of responsibility was staggering. For broken aliens and a small coalition of rebels now possessed information that could change the course of galactic history. But they also held the target that would bring the full fury of the hegemony down upon them. "We need time to plan," Elena said, understanding the magnitude of what they faced. "Time to prepare defenses, gather allies, coordinate." She was interrupted by alarms beginning to sound throughout the station. Red lights bathed the medical bay as emergency broadcasts filled the air. "All hands to emergency stations." Multiple hyperspace signatures detected at nebula perimeter. Configuration unknown, but consistent with pursuit vessels. This is not a drill. Through the station's viewing ports, Marcus could see energy signatures beginning to penetrate the nebula's edge. More ships than had pursued them, with power readings that suggested something far larger than simple raiders. "How do they find us?" Elena demanded. Shadow's response came through a combination of mechanical translation and emotional projection to Marcus. The wolf species had developed technologies that could track quantum signatures across vast distances, technologies the hegemony had captured and perverted to their own purposes. "They followed the residual traces from my ship," Shadow explained. "The quantum entanglement patterns that allow our technology to function. I didn't think they had the capability to track us through the nebula, but they've had 1,000 years to study Valkyris technology," Marcus finished grimly. Elena was already moving, her command training taking over as the immediate crisis demanded attention. "All right, we plan as we go." Shadow, I need to know what those ships are capable of and how we can fight them. Marcus, your ship's modifications, can they be adapted to our defensive systems? Given time, yes, Marcus said, his mind already working through the technical challenges. Time's the one thing we don't have, Elena said as the station shuddered under some kind of massive energy pulse. They're using active scanning to map our defenses. Through the viewing port, the first enemy ship became visible through the nebula's swirling gases. It was enormous, easily 10 times the size of Phoenix Station, and its whole design spoke of technologies that bent space itself to their will. But, as Marcus watched, he noticed something interesting. The ship was advancing slowly, cautiously, its sensors sweeping continuously for threats. It was powerful, but it was also afraid. They don't know what we're capable of, he said suddenly. They're treating this like a military engagement, not a simple cleanup operation. Shadow's agreement came with overtones of tactical analysis. The hegemony had learned caution the hard way, through encounters with other species that had surprised them with unexpected capabilities. They wouldn't underestimate Phoenix Station the way they'd underestimated individual refugees. But they also wouldn't retreat. Too much was at stake. As the station's crew raced to prepare for battle, Marcus felt a strange calm settling over him. For the first time since finding Shadow in his salvage yard, everything was clear. They'd found allies, uncovered the scope of the threat, and discovered the location of weapons that could tip the balance of power. Now all they had to do was survive long enough to use them. The war for galactic freedom was about to begin in earnest, and it would start with a desperate defense of the one place where different species had learned to trust each other completely. Phoenix Station represented everything the hegemony feared: cooperation, innovation, and the stubborn refusal to surrender in the face of overwhelming odds. Through his connection with Shadow, Marcus felt the wolf's determination resonating with his own. They'd come too far to fail now. Whatever the cost, the archive's secrets would reach those who could use them. The future of every free species in the galaxy depended on it.